Welcome, it's Drew Blazik, Logos and Markets. In this final fourth video, we're going to calculate yield to worst and build a dynamic model for yield to call, not just the year that they could call it in, but every year after that. Let's get straight to it. All right, so where we ended up last, what we did, we calculated the convexity of the modified duration. That is a linear estimate, and we also calculated what the actual price. And we compared modified duration, which is a simple calculation, with the actual, and it gives us that graph. The last part, what we want to calculate is we want to know what is the yield to worst, and this is an important statistic that we want to know as an investor. If there's a call option, if there's a put option, what is the worst possible outcome that I can return from this security if something happens in interest rates? So that's what this is going to calculate. And I want to know what year does it happen as well. So we have to build a dynamic model for it to adjust depending on what we selected for this. So let's look at the grade real quick. We completed the treasury bills. We completed corporate bonds, 86%. That is this summary sheet. We still got two things to enter in. And then what we want to work on is our yield to call, yield to worst. And there's our overall grade so far. So what we're going to do is I want you to think about what we want to do here is we want to build a dynamic model. You want to think about how do you build a function that you could do a bond that's 2 years, you could do 30 years, and you can call it in 5 years, 10 years, 15, whatever it is. We want to automatically calculate those years here that it could be called, and what is the rate at which it would be called, and what year is that worst year for the rate to happen in. So what we want to do first is we want to find out what function do we want to use for our year. So for example, let's go back to our bond. This is a 20-year maturity. I don't want anything beyond 20 years, right? Because that wouldn't make sense and that would kind of hurt our model. We want it to end. You're not going to call a bond 21 years or actually 20 years. It has to be called before that. And also, I don't want anything before the 5th year or whatever. Let's say we did the 6th year. I don't want that to change. I don't want it to calculate yield to call in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th because you only could call in the 6th year. So what we want to do is we want to build a dynamic model here. So we're going to start this with an if function. And if functions, we want to know a logical test here. So I labeled that called year to call. That means in what year can they first call this bond back? That's what we want to know. So we want to say if it's less than or equal to maturity. What does that mean? If the yield to call is less than maturity, that's the only way it could work, right? If the yield to call, if we made a mistake on this model and we said you can call it in 30 years, but the bond only goes to 20, we don't want any calculations to happen. We only want it to happen if the yield to call was less than maturity. So we're going to hit comma. If that is true, then we want our sequence to happen, have it to drop down. So this is the equation that we want. We want maturity. That's the 20 years. And then we want to say minus the year to call. And then I'm going to say plus 1. That would be the rows, what I want it to happen. Is that the year it's going to start in? No. That's saying maturity minus yield to call. I want that chunk of years to appear here. So kind of play it through our mind here. Maturity is 20. Yield to call was 5. So I want 15 years to populate, right? That's all it's saying. Plus 1. And then I'm going to hit comma. How many columns that we want? Well, I want 1 column because we're only just doing this column here. And then next, what I want to know is what is the start? When do I want this to start? I only want this to start on the call year. And that's going to be the year to call, right? I want to start the 5th year. If we chose 3 years, I want to start in the 3rd year. And then what is our step? We want it to go by 1 year each time. So I'm gonna hit 1. We're gonna close this up. Remember, this is a logical function. And what this is saying is if the is less than maturity, I wanted to do these calculation. If it is greater than maturity, I'm going to hit comma. I want this cell to be blank. I do not want it to go beyond that. So look, oh, I already have that already calculated. Let me delete that real quick. Okay. So I said 5, so I forgot I switched to 6. Let's go back to 5, and we can see if it's dynamic. We'll go to our yield to call. See what it did? It started in the 5th year. That's what I wanted. And I only wanted this to go up until maturity. I don't want it to go beyond that. That's that if function. If it goes beyond maturity, maturity is 20, I do not want it to be a calculation. And we're going by ones, and we're only calculating up to the 20th year. So it actually did it perfect in that example. All right, next what we want to do is we want to figure out if we have, hold on, I'm trying to pull this. All right, so what we want to do is now we want to find out what is our yield to call if they call it within this year. So this is pretty simple here. But I do not want this to calculate anything because the problem with Excel, it will be an error if it calculated a blank cell. If it's down here, I'm going to drag this function down. I don't want it to calculate anything if this is blank. So we're going to start this yield to call and say an if function. And all we're going to say is if this cell is equal to a blank cell. Very simple. I'm going to hit comma. If that's true, I want this to be blank. I don't want a calculation. If this cell is not blank, that means we're going to calculate these. Now what we can do is our rate. And we already calculated our yield to call rate. Same as that concept. So the yield to call rate is going to be, I'm just going to type it in because you can't see it. It's hard to select it because our function is there. So I'm going to say B5. That is this cell multiplied times periodic payment. That'd be our NPER. If they call it in the 5th year, if they call it in the 6th year, then we're going to say comma. Now, what is PMT? That's our coupon payment. Comma, what is our present value? That's the price we paid. That'd be a negative price. Make sure you hit negative. Comma, what's the future value? Now, some of us might be tempted to type in our future value is going to be the par value. But remember, it is not the par value. It is PTC, price to call. And that's what we named it. It's that if they call it, they must pay us a certain price. Now, some bonds might be, depending on when they call it, the price to call could change. This isn't that complex. We're just going to do the same price to call if they call it in the 5th year, 6th year, 7th year. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to close that up. And then remember, that would be the interest rate according to the payments, which is semi-annual payments. This would be the interest rate in 6 months. I must multiply it times our periodic payments, which is 2. All right, and then we're going to close that up. And then we could hit enter. And that gave us our yield to call. And then what we want to do, since we built a pretty good model here, if I hit down, and you can see, oh, I hate when it drags that down. So if I hit control, why did it drag that down? If that happens with, you see what's going on here? If I drag it down, my format actually drag down that border. I don't like that. So I'm going to hit Control Z. What you could do is I hit Control C. I'm going to copy that. And what you can do is I could highlight all of these going down. I hit Control, Shift Control, goes all the way down. And then I'm going to hit Alt ESF. I'm going to copy the formula. If you have a Mac, it's a little different. I don't remember how to do it. And I'm going to hit paste. Now see what this did. It dragged it down perfectly up until maturity, because in this function, if this cell is blank, it created this to be blank as well. So now it shows us the yield to call. And as you see, the yield to call declines because the longer you hold on to it, the yield to call or the price to call becomes less and less valuable, right? They're going to give you 1,050. Now the yield to call becomes less and less. So if we build a model that it changes depending how long they hold on to it, that would change the dynamics of that. But this is a dynamic model. It's calculating it perfectly. Now we want to know, in what year does the worst option happen? We can see it's going to be the 20th year. But let's build this model here. And what we're going to do here is do an index function. And we want to know in what array. So this is going to be B5. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this. I want to know what number, what column am I going to pull this number in, the index. So I'm going to hold down Shift Control. I'm going to go all the way down. And I'm going to hit comma. I'm going to go one up. You see how that value, there's an error there? We don't want to put, I try to go out of my way not to have errors, because if you're going to calculate these and there's an error in there, it's not going to come out. So I'm going to go one up and I'm going to hit comma. And now what it's asking is, what is the row number? So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a match function. We want to match it. And then what we want to match, we want to know what year does it match the minimum. And we want to know in column, much quicker way to do this, but I want to know what is the minimum yield to call. And I'm going to hold down Control Shift. We're going to go all the way down. I'm going to hold down Shift, go one up. I don't want that error in there. And I'm going to close that up. And then I'm going to hit comma. And then it says lookup array. I'm going to look up the same D again. Hold down Control Shift. Highlight all those there. And now what's asking is, do we want to look up? So we're looking up the minimum, the index, we're matching it. We want to know the minimum of these. And what do we want? We want less than, exact match, or greater. We want a 0. We want exact match. So whatever the minimum is, that's what we're looking up. I want the exact match. The minimum right here, I want that 20 to pull up. Hit enter. And it's going to pull up. I forgot one of the brackets. You have to do a double bracket at the end. And now what it did, it pulled that in. Perfect. So when does a yield to call? The worst year that this happens, the minimum, happens in the 20th year. That's not the yield to worst yet. That's just the worst. That's the year that the worst yield to call could happen for us as an investor. Let's go to the grade. So it shows we did it 100%. Just to make sure we did the model correct, let's go here. I'm going to change this to 25 years. I'm going to change this to, let's say, 7 years. I'm going to change this price to yield to call to 1,030. And what we can go is to our grade, and it still gives us 100%. So we did, and we can go back here. Yep, happened in the 25th year. It goes up to 25, and it does not start till the 7th year. So this is a dynamic model, perfect. Whatever we want to enter in, it'll automatically calculate. And now all we have to do is go here, and I'm going to zoom up a bit. And what we want to do is calculate a few things here. We want to know what year does that happen. I'm just going to go equals. I'm going to go to our yield to worst. I'm going to bring this in. And then we want to know what is the worst possible outcome that this could happen in. And we want to know what year would that happen in. So the worst possible outcome is, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a minimum function. I want to know the worst. So what's the lowest yield to maturity? I'm going to type in yield to maturity. I'm going to hit comma, and then I'm going to go to yield to call, and I'm going to highlight, hit shift control all the way down. I want to know what the worst possible outcome is. Hit enter. So the worst possible outcome is our yield to maturity. So we know in this contract, we're not going to earn anything less. And if that happens, it's going to happen in the full year of the maturity. Now, that doesn't mean the company won't call it in another year. It depends on interest rates. Remember, the reason why a company would call this is because something happened with interest rates. Interest rates were dropping. Therefore, they could get out of this contract and go into another, they could issue another bond at a lower interest rate. But you as an investor, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. You want to know what is the lowest possibility. Well, the lowest possibility is if they hold on to maturity. That's the lowest possibility. Okay, what happens if there is no call? So let's say 0. We got a bunch of errors that popped up. So I forgot I did it in this one. What we want to do is, here, I'm going to take this out real quick because I don't think I did it in the video. So we got a bunch of errors here. The reason is because there's no calculation. If we go here, there is no calculation here. Right? We have an error here. We have an error here. Is because the original, there is no call option. So it's going to give us an error. There is no call option and we don't have the lowest year. So what we want to do is we want to go into each of these functions, and I'm going to go in the beginning, and we want to type up if error, if there is an error, which means there is no call option. I'm going to hit comma. So if this function becomes an error, I'm going to hit quote, NA, quote, and then it's going to properly say it's not applicable to it because there is no call option. And we want to go into this one, do the same thing. I'm going to go in front of that rate, hit if error, comma, and a, close quote, and then oh, I forgot to put the NA. You could leave it blank, but how I did it, I did NA. Okay. Quote NA. There we go. Now we put in there, perfectly does it. Now it's dynamic. I think we are complete. Let's look at our grade. We got 100% on the entire thing. Looks good to go on our end. Everything is complete. I think this is one of the best models you can look at. The only thing I'm going to say is the only thing to make this more dynamic, if you want to put this in there, and maybe I'll create another video, is what if we change the call option, the call to price? What price can they give you depending on what year they call it? If we change that, the dynamics will change on our what year would be the most lowest yield to maturity. If we don't change it, it's typically always going to be the last year in that regard. So there you go. This is Drew Blazik, Logos and Markets. Make sure, if this is one of my classes, make sure that you have this 100% completed. This is the grade that will get pulled into our learning management system that you will get graded on. So just let you know that. God bless, Los Tibby Christie, and just let you know, any questions, please let me know. And you know what? If you have any suggestions of making a more complex bond model, I mean, when we went pretty in depth with all these, this is the 4th video. If this is the first video you watch, please watch the beginning ones to understand this. Go to the website, Logos and Markets. You can pull this Excel sheet. I'll have it up soon, and you can work with it. And if you're interested in how to use these in a academic sense for education, please contact me. Or even I want to venture off to the corporate world. If you could see this could be a learning system for um, new employees coming in, and this could be a grading system. I have a lot of easy ways that you can grade 1,000. You can grade 1,000 different students, and I can incorporate this in very quickly. So just so you know, contact me if you are interested. Thank you. See you. Bye.